Meeting of the Purple Line engagement process. My name is Mike Sable. I am a former staff member for the City of Maplewood. I was once upon a time the assistant city manager, and I was encouraged to come back and participate in this process because partially through my experience and background in facilitation, and I just love the community. And so any chance I get a chance to come back, I am eager to do that. Welcome to the second of the meetings that are here, and I think I'll just give a sort of a brief recap. At the last meeting, there was a presentation by Metropolitan Council staff outlining some of the history of the project and some of the work that has gone to get us to this point. And we are now at the sort of the second piece, which is a presentation from the No Rush Line Coalition presentation with information as well. And I think the entire point of this process is really to give the City Council and the decision makers good information from which to make the best decisions. And I think as this community has demonstrated repeatedly, doing that in an authentic way, in a real way, in a respectful way of hearing voices, getting input, asking thoughtful questions, and really doing a deep dive and engagement, I think is a testament to the quality of the community, but also a testament to the respect that people show and give to one another. And so I encourage folks to use this opportunity to listen respectfully. I did also want to forecast that there is going to be another session on March 8th where there's going to be an opportunity for direct public comment and input. So if you came to talk, there's not going to be tonight, but I promise that next week it's going to be, no pun intended, but sort of open mic night. And so this is really an opportunity for listening, and also for the members of the task force, loosely called. This is also an opportunity for you to write down questions. So similar to last time, if there's something that's said or a slide that triggers a thought or a question, I'd really encourage you to write those down so we can make sure that we capture those. If there's time today, you can ask them in the moment. Also, because this is a crowded room, we want to make sure that everybody can hear. And so if we would ask the task force members with microphones, if you could turn them on. And then I'm going to start with Mr. Thompson because I can see you clearly. If you could tell us your name and the agency or organization that you represent, I want to test your audio, please.
Sure. Nick Thompson, you can hear that?
I can.
I am with Metro Transit. I'm the Deputy General Manager for Capital Programs.
Good. And if we can just work our way this way, please.
Kathy Juniman, City Council.
Thank you.
Amanda Dewar, VP of Public Affairs at the St. Paul Area Chamber.
Thank you.
Mary Lee Abrams, Mayor of Maplewood.
Chanberry Lee, Maplewood City Council.
Good.
And Diana Longree, I'm a organizing member of the No Rush Line Coalition.
Wonderful, thank you. There are a few absences. Several members of the City Council could not make it today for reasons, and Robert Smaller works for Costco, was actually still at Costco, so he is not going to be able to be here tonight. But I just want to jump right in. So we are at this, as I said, the second phase, and this is really a presentation from the No Rush Line Coalition. We have set aside about 90 minutes for presentation. We do have some flexibility, so if it goes 85, great. If it goes 95, I think we've got some opportunities to be flexible. Again, as I shared at the introduction last time, for members of the group to really listen for clarity and find questions for clarity purposes, things that will give you information for making a good quality decision. As I shared at the last meeting, all of these projects result in competing values. If it's concerns over safety, if it's concerns over economic issues, or if it's concerns over access, all of those values matter. Different people hold them at different levels. And so what we're really trying to do is kind of capture where there is some consensus around the values of the community and values of what's most important. So no one's opinion is wrong. It's just different. And so this is a venue to actually share things that are different. Excuse me. So that's my role in this is to create space for people to share their opinions and their dialogue. And I think the No Rush Line Coalition is well poised to do that. If there are no other questions from the group, I want to introduce Tim David as the first speaker. In terms of process-wise, because Tim knows the material and knows the group so well, he's going to do sort of the rest of the introductions of folks. And so if you're comfortable doing that, we will also have a mix of slides, overhead camera, and easels. And so we will do our best to make sure that the folks who are watching at home can see all of the materials and engage in all of the process. The other thing I'll say for the folks at home is if you are interested in this issue, you can check out maplewoodmn.gov. There's plenty of information about this. You can watch it. You can watch the materials. You can submit questions. You can submit comments. So really, this is intended to be a robust, open process. And Joe, is that up and running? So if we can have the folks in the booth turn the laptop on. Mr. David, if I can invite you to come on up, I will. The floor is yours.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thanks, Mike.
Here, you're welcome.
Thank you. Good evening, task force members, city council members, and mayor. First, I'll say thanks for letting us present today. We look forward to this discussion. You can see on the screen, those are the 9 items we're going to be covering today. We've got a full agenda. We've got a number of speakers. We think we have a lot of good material that we're going to review with folks today. We think it's going to be a good discussion. Just a bit of background. I'm Tim David. For over a year and a half, I've been leading the No Rush Line group. For the last few months, I've been co-leading the group with Jane Coleus, a lifelong Maplewood resident who lives along the Bruce Vento Trail. She was planning to attend tonight. However, she is in probably on the beach in Florida this week with her family, so good for her. But I've lived in the Northeast metro area for over 50 years. I worked for 7 years as an analyst in the Public Works Street Design section for the city of Minneapolis. I then worked for 18 years as a project manager helping government agencies at the state, federal, and local level evaluate and improve how they deliver their services. So our group has been working for over 20 months on the issue of transit in our communities. We've been talking with residents, meeting with businesses, meeting with nearly every elected official at the state and local level in multiple communities, and we've researched the issue of transit in our communities. First and foremost, I'll say we do not oppose public transit. However, we do want, and the residents and businesses we talk to, want effective and efficient transit that fits the communities. We do not believe the current proposed Purple Line is a good fit, and we'll discuss some of the why it is not a good fit in our presentation. We believe there are better solutions for transit in a post-COVID transit world, and we'll talk about those solutions. As a result of our work, listening to thousands of community residents and hundreds of businesses through our public forums, our rallies, our pop-up events, and our surveys, we have, if you go to I got the slide. Yeah. Thank you. All right. We have over 6,000 people who have signed online petitions opposing the current proposed Purple Line. 1,500 people have signed our paper petition, which means those people have stood face to face with us and told us their views about the Purple Line. We've had those conversations. Over 100 businesses have signed our petition and opposed the line. The following cities have passed resolutions or motions stating some type of opposition to the current proposed Purple Line. And that includes, and I'm sure most folks are aware, the city of White Bear Lake, the city of Vadnais Heights, the city of Gem Lake, and the city of Maplewood made a very strong statement about the existing proposed Purple Line. Now let's do a look at some transit solutions that we've researched and heard from folks around the communities. We believe transit should be delivered in a more flexible, right-sized, community-friendly manner, and it should include transit solutions such as using existing roadways that allows flexibility as user needs change, shorter buses than the 65-foot, 89 articulated buses designed to run every day on this line. We think that is an overbuild. We think the solution should be flexible routes to accommodate changes in ridership needs and expanded use of the existing services that are essentially curb to curb and more flexible to users. Stop it. Siri. That are more flexible to user needs, and the list is up on this slides. So let me go through each of these alternatives. We're calling them solutions. Arterial BRT. This is a smaller, more flexible version of the full BRT. It does not require a $474 million dedicated, inflexible guideway. This has been used successfully by Met Council in a number of other situations. Metro Mobility. This is a transit service that we believe should be properly funded to provide curb-to-curb service to people in the community who have specialized transit needs. We hear time and time again that that service is not a really highly regarded service. That's in part because we do not think it should be funded. We think it is not fully funded properly. We believe it should be funded properly for those transit needy folks who can use it. New Tracks. It's a regional transit service based out of up here on Highway 61 that provides regular scheduled routes. They currently have dedicated routes to places such as White Bear to Stillwater, Stillwater to Forest Lake, White Bear to Forest Lake. They provide dedicated routes to employers where they pick up employees each morning and deliver them to the employer's sites and then return them home at the end of their shift. In fact, that's why New Tracks, which is a nonprofit, it's why they were created, to fill a need to get transit-needy people to employers' locations. We think this is a huge solution to the transit needed by employers that we believe should be expanded. Transit Link. Transit Link is a Met Council on-demand service using the shorter buses that any individual can call on demand and pay $3.50 to take them curb to curb to their desired destination within the service area. So that means if I could call Transit Link and they could deliver me to Cub and then pick me up Cub with my groceries and take me back home. This is what we call the Uber of Met Council. We think this could be expanded. Local and connector routes. These use existing roadways and are adaptable to changing transit needs. Next bullet item is what we call destination routes. These are dedicated transit services that could be curb to curb for transit needy employees. Again, we think this would be a valuable use for employees who need to get to the employer. I expect that every employer knows the addresses of their employees. These addresses can be geocoded, put on a map, and routing software can create the best route to pick up the majority of these staff at the start of a shift, deliver them at the curb of the employer, and then pick them up again at the end of their shift, curb to curb, and deliver them to their home. I would like to ask if the Met Council has done this type of analysis that could truly identify, using routing software, geocoding software, where those folks are, that they live, and where they need to get to the employers, and do a best routing of the bus transit service. Metro Transit Micro. This is a Met Council service for near home trips that is on demand. Users request a ride through an app. The average wait time is 6 minutes. It's a new service being piloted by Met Council, which we applaud this type of innovation. It's an approach to provide transit to folks within a few miles of their house. And the majority of most transit needs are within a few miles of your home. A study by the Bureau of Transportation Statistics identified over 50% of all trips, including all modes of transportation, were less than 3 miles from your home. This, again, is the concept of an Uber on demand for the same price as a bus ride with a 6-minute wait. This type of service is currently being used in Plymouth. It's called the Click and Ride. Southwest Prime in Eden Prairie. The MVT Connect in Apple Valley, Burnsville, Savage, Rosemount, and Egan. And in Maple Grove, it's a service, it's called Maple Grove My Ride. We think there could be a Maplewood My Ride. The need for transit has changed significantly since COVID has resulted in changes in our work styles, our lifestyles, and transit needs. And much of this change will become the norm and will impact all of our transit design. We need greater innovation to provide effective transit in our community. We do not believe we should be implementing a transit line that was first proposed almost 20 years ago. And just to be clear, it's not just Maplewood that's discussing the issue of future transit and discussing the issue. Next slide, if you would. Thank you. All right. It's ahead of me. And can everybody hear me? I'll do a sound check. You guys can all hear me? Okay. It's not just Maplewood dealing with this issue of future transit. This is what the national experts are saying. The director of the American Public Transportation Association said post-COVID transit, big picture will come back differently. We'll have to adapt to the changes. The director for the Center of Transportation Studies at the U of M, Kyle Shelton, who I've spoken with, transportation choices have been impacted hugely by COVID across the board. We should think about all of our planned projects in a new way. The chairman of the Met Council quoted, "We do not have a clear picture of the long-term future of commuter transit demand and needs. The current design of the Purple Line for transit is not a good fit in our post-COVID world." And now we're going to talk about some key issues, some key reasons about why it is not a good fit. Stand up.
Thank you very much. And also, I'm going to be using the overhead camera here as well.
What are you going to use first? You're going to use the overhead camera first and the video first?
The overhead camera first, yes, okay. And I'm not ready for it quite yet, okay. Now, over 22 years ago, the rails were removed along the rail line, as we see in this picture. And if we put this up like this,
You got to put it this way.
oh, I see, okay. It's reverse, okay. And this is Highway 6, okay, this is Highway 61, this is Larpenteur, and this was originally where the rail lines were. So you can see that placement. And over, like I said, over 22 years ago, those rails were removed, and in their place became a public right-of-way. Now, that public right-of-way, Ramsey County, as we all know, was working on the big plans for the Rush Line transit through there. First, it was going to be a light rail, then it was going to be a BRT, but they were working on these plans for over 15 years. Now, as part of that planning, they looked at other BRTs and tried to figure out how they could make this particular location fit the best practices that other BRT projects throughout the country use. Now, one of those trips was to go to Richmond, Virginia, and this is from the Ramsey County website, which shows that they went, they looked at the Pulse BRT tour in Richmond, Virginia. Now, I will say that the BRT in Richmond, Virginia is a very successful BRT. When the Ramsey County Policy Advisory Task Force went out there, I also went out there at that same time so that I could follow what they were seeing, because back in 2019, this was a very important issue to me then, and I wanted to see why they thought that the Richmond, Virginia BRT was similar to the Rush Line BRT. And so you can see in the language there that it says, and I'll read it so it's hard to see it there, but it says that the experiences of goal is to experience a dedicated guideway BRT route similar to the planned Rush Line BRT project. And so when they came back we heard a lot, and the reason I bring this up is because we hear a lot of this in the documentation about how similar that successful BRT is to the Rush Line BRT that's being planned, which is now called the Purple Line. Well, I have here with me video from Richmond, Virginia that I'd like to show. This video initially was taken actually from the top of City Hall, because their City Hall is downtown in Richmond, Virginia, and you can actually go to the top floor of the building, and it's like a skyline view of the whole city. It's amazing. So let's take a look at that video so you can take a look at the Richmond, Virginia BRT. Let's take a look.
Steve, can we pull up the laptop?
So what we're seeing here is from, as I mentioned, from the top of City Hall. And we are looking at the route. You can see there is the Pulse BRT right there. I zoomed in on it. And that is the BRT route in Richmond, Virginia. And on the one end of it is the State University, and on the other end of it is three or so large employers. This is the street view so that you can see what the street view looks like of their dedicated BRT route in Richmond, Virginia. And part of the reason it's so successful is it has a dedicated funding stream coming into it, in that each of the students that go to the State University, as part of their activity fee, they're required to buy a annual ticket so that they can use this all the time. But that's the dynamics of this BRT system. And the reason I want to bring this up, because next you're going to see how it is so very different. Oh, there's the bus, the Pulse. There you go. And you saw some of the stations as well. So you know it gives you a good idea of what it looks like. And now we're going to take a look at the Bruce Vento Trail. This is fall, of course, so it's not as heavily treed with leaves with the tree canopy and everything. But I think you get the idea of how it is entirely different from Richmond, Virginia. Entirely different. And the reason that this is so important is because the Bruce Vento Trail is an ecological greenway. It is not downtown Richmond, Virginia. Look at that beautiful trail. And anybody who's been on that trail knows the importance of that trail. But you know, it's not just important for, you know, the urban wildlife to get from greenway to greenway in order to preserve their biodiversity. It's also important for the people of Maplewood, because it's part of the equity that we provide to our residents. Not everybody has the ability to go to the lake for the weekend, or to go to some space out somewhere out in the country, that for many people, this is their little piece of Mother Nature. This is their opportunity to get out to the wild. Now, next we're going to have a presentation by Kathy Seidels, who is going to tell you a little bit more about why it is so important ecologically for an endangered species.
Oh, I'm sorry. I'm Kathy Seidels. I live 6 blocks with my husband, 6 blocks east of Lake Phelan. We're on the trail a lot, and also I've been a long time St. Paul Parks volunteer, pulling garlic mustard, invading the understory of the forest, and picking up trash. And I can do that for hours and hours because I am a bird watcher and take pictures and count birds for eBird, upload them. And since 2016, I've been looking for bumblebees while I do this work. Next slide. I can do that? Okay. What do I do right here? Okay. Thank you. That's great. Okay. Okay.
Just hit the middle one.
The middle one.
Yeah, yeah, okay.
The one in the middle.
Yeah, yeah, I got it. It buzzed just like a bumblebee. Anyway, so in 2016, I heard that a bumblebee was headed for the endangered species list, the first endangered bumblebee. And so I took pictures of bumblebees at the south end of Lake Phelan on my way home from work. And sometime that winter, I took the time to look at them. And one of them was, that's a picture of it, the endangered rusty patch bumblebee. You can see the rusty patch down under its wings there. And like all the other pictures of bumblebees and birds I take, I upload them to eBird and Bumblebee Watch, and experts review them and verify them. Sorry.
You got your head.
They said you said us that.
What? Okay. So, and then at the same time, I saw another one in the cup plants at the south end of Lake Phelan. This is right off the Bruce Venno Trail. If you've been that far south, where it curves down and it goes along the south shore of Lake Phelan, that's where these rusty patch bumblebees were. So, sorry.
I got you. Right.
Okay. So, and then a couple of years later, in the same area, in the wetland there right off the berm, I saw 4 of them by then I had taken the Bumblebee ID class through the Bee Lab, which I take every year, so this will be year 4 of taking that, and then during Bumblebee Count Week, I do some extra effort, and that's when I saw these. Thanks. And then there's a Lawnsill Legumes program, very popular, bipartisan. You can apply now for $350 to upgrade your yard for pollinators. It's called, the legumes are mow high and less often. You have clover in your yard. I wondered, do bumblebees like clover? And so I surveyed all the acres when they were mowing it high. They mow it short now for some reason, south of Lake Phelan, where I saw the other ones off the trail. And after seeing a whole bunch of bumblebees, I did see this one rusty patch at clover. And then as the trail goes along Phelan Boulevard, then when you get to Heritage Park, where it's the old creek bed from Lake Phelan, which is now buried in the Beltline Interceptor tube that goes parallel to Birmingham. And I'll get to that in a minute here, but the old creek bed where Lower Phelan Creek Project has plans that are moving along to daylight it again, part of it. Then there's a whole lot of bumblebees along the corridor there when they mow high and less often. It was planted with native plants, but somebody decided it had to be mowed, but if they don't mow it often, there's flowers, there's bumblebees, and by the time you get to Heritage Park, I saw a few endangered rusty patch bumblebees, as well as like tons of other bumblebees there. Next slide. And so this is Lower Phelan Creek Project, Dakota led. They have plans to daylight south of Phelan and also as it dives down into Sweet Hollow. But the rush line concrete, the extra 2 lanes plus the bike lane conflict with that. But this is a very rich place, and not just for the rusty patches, but it's where I see lots of black and gold bumblebees, including one American bumblebee, which is headed for the endangered species list, is a possible ID according to the Bee Lab experts that look at my pictures. And then I see them also down into Sweet Hollow and then up on the bluffs at Mounts Park. Next slide. And then farther back up, it's not that far from the trail, Ames Lake on the south end of Maryland, where the Watershed District does a good job with this, getting the city to burn sometimes, and is very rich in floral habitat, they call it, and I've seen a number of 16 over the years, rusty patches there. And then that area connects with a forest south of there, and then there's some railroad tracks that go east, and up above where the utilities are buried, there's neglected natural areas run by Public Works, and I've seen a handful of rusty patch bumblebees there, and this one coyote you can see there. And then up in Maplewood at Gladstone, during the drought, that's where all the neighborhood water drains into there, and it was still damp, and I saw a rusty patch at Gladstone. And also along Keller Creek, it's been restored with native plants, as has Keller Lake and Lake Phelan, and I see a number of rusty patches there. And then also at the Poor Farm Cemetery off of White Bear, the university had people come because it seemed like there might be a nest of rusty patches. Most people had never seen them who surveyed for them. And so there's some pictures of them there. And I had also seen them across the Gateway Trail at the Maplewood. The Maplewood Nature Center had done some restoration, so and I saw 11 of them there a couple different times across the gateway from there. And then Reservoir Woods off of Larpenteur, and then up north at Tamarack Nature Center, I've seen them there. And then this is our house. I've been restoring our yard with native plants for over 20 years, and with the drought, it killed the grass, so I let it's called Virginia waterleaf, took over. So I thought, well, just kind of, you're supposed to mow it at 8 inches, which I'm all for, but I let it grow a little bit. And one day I saw 7 different species of queen bumblebees. They overwinter in soft soil, and they come out, they're short of spring flowers, and they found our yard. How did they do that? And that one in the upper left is an endangered rusty patch queen, which don't have the rusty patch, just to make things interesting. And then 3 of her workers in 3 different days showed up in our yard last spring. Then this university was having us capture bumblebees at the West Shore Phelan and then bring them over to the expert under the tree who would ID them and let them go. But with COVID, they quit doing that, asked us who had taken the class to do it instead. And so I did for a summer, and then the last 2, I thought, well, what happens during a drought? So I just kept it up myself, upload them to Bumblebee Watch, and it does go down. So next slide. So I've seen 18 of them over there. And then they have us looking outstate now because they don't see them outstate. It sounds like they're everywhere, and they're not. So I went down south of Albert Lee, and after many, many trips and many, many hours, saw one. So they had me move over to the west where it's more prairie and more farmland now because it's so flat, so it's corn and beans, and nothing. I hardly saw any bumblebees there. So I've seen 127 since 2016, which sounds like a lot, but I'm retired, and so it takes about 200 or 300 of me looking at them on walks with my husband, picking up trash, all that stuff, and then I'll see one. So. And next slide. And so you can see they used to be everywhere. They used to be common. They're generalist bumblebee. But where'd they go? Now they're just in where the green dots are, not where the black dots are. And those are mostly cities. And so here's some guesses. Next slide. When I moved up here from Iowa 42 years ago, I remember pesticides were banned or at least controlled. And outstate soybean aphids, they overwinter on our buckthorn, northern buckthorn, fly down there. They have to spray millions of acres. And that kills all the insects. That's 1. 2, watershed districts do a great job restoring with native plants. The pollinators are native, and their mouth parts just fit the native plants. Connected natural areas, whether on purpose or not. The trail, we're a river city, it's all hilly, we can't build everywhere. So we have, on purpose, accidentally, the railroads, the buried utilities, and the gateway, the Bruce Fenno, and because the male bees only have their mother's genetics, so they have to mate with somebody from a different nest. So how does that happen? It's just barely happening, or otherwise the populations plummet. And we have soft soil. This shows, I went and looked at when do I see the earliest bumblebees. It's in late April, and they're all along the Bruce Fenno Trail, except I think there's one at my house. Maybe that there's something with the berm itself, the disturbed soil, and it's soft. And the new queens overwinter, and everybody else dies off. And then they come out, and then they have to find spring flowers. And so I was talking about the healthy genetics. So I'm not going to explain this slide here, but and then we also have public support on this lawsuit. Look, UMC just have way more people applying to help save this bumblebee, which is our new state bee. And next slide. And then Maplewood Living Newsletter featured the Rusty Patch and said, mow high and less often, and try to have more flowers in your yard for them. Friends of Sweet Hollow and the Boy Scout Project at Reservoir Woods, when they put interpretive signs up, they both have the Rusty Patch bumblebee on there. And then as a bird watcher, this is where it gets really hard to imagine this trail going away, because the migrating birds that fly up the Mississippi Flyway, they see our rich St. Paul habitat in Maplewood, and they go, I need a rest, and they drop down, and they find food to eat so they can continue on and have their babies up in the northern forests where there's more bugs on the trees. And then it's bottomland forest and wetlands, and there's owls, there's hawks, there's turtles, there's frogs. It's just great. And to bulldoze thousands of trees and put 2 strips of concrete, next slide, is hard to see. And yet we're coexisting with it. It's not just a natural area. All of these pictures that I took that have verified are while we're using this trail. It's warm in the winter, wind-free in the summer. And so what I think we should do, and I always try to have a better option, being from the east side of St. Paul, we need better transit. This trail doesn't go to most of the jobs are downtown. The trail never went to tons of jobs up north, considering what we lose. To recycle your housing, you need green space and you need good public transit. A lot of our apartments are scattered around. New ones are being built far off the trail. And there's just a real high density east on Maryland, and you have to take the 64 and then wait 15 minutes for the rush line in order to get downtown. You're not going to do that, so you're going to stay on the 64. Bus rapid transit on 35E, where I work south of town, you can't get there on the bus now. You have to go to Minneapolis and this and that and the other thing. We should do like 35W and go north and south on public transit and have local fancy buses like the Snelling that go to our businesses, that go to our scattered higher density populations. And that should be, and from what I can see, and I'm open to ideas, but that's what I think the purple line should be like. And that was the second option that wasn't chosen. So next slide. And so also Portland did a wildlife corridor plan before their light rail project in 2010. There's a link to it. I have this all in a PDF if anybody wants it. And you can find this great plan, and I just learned a ton. The way that they wrote it was very well written. And we should do that too before we take out all this stuff. Minnesota has a corridor plan, but it doesn't go into the East Metro. As you can see, it's just more of an outstate thing, except for Sweet Hollow. There's new tree equity data. You don't want to take out thousands of trees without studying this. It adds a whole bunch of salt right next to Lake Phelan, right next to Bottomland Forest, right next to wetlands, farther north. Salt doesn't go away. It's a forever chemical. It builds up. It's been in the news lately in Minnesota, throughout Minnesota for that reason. And we should also design things so it's still frog-friendly. There's frogs all the way along there if you listen during the spring. It adds lights, it adds noise, dark skies. It turns out that pollinators aren't healthy unless they have light and dark. They don't know when to eat right. And so also, it's hard to see, but the houses, if you want to walk the trail south of Larpenteur, because the houses are right up against the trail. And I counted once, there's like 80 dwellings or residences, apartments, duplex, single family, like right off of the trail that's going to go late at night. It's unhealthy for wildlife to have noise. It's unhealthy for people. You have higher cancer rates. You have kids not sleeping. And also concrete, people say, well, it's all about CO2 and global warming. Got to have public transit, but concrete takes a lot of CO2 to make because you need high temperatures. So you can't use wind and solar. And the Audubon plan, restoration plan, puts 23% of the carbon into the soil by restoring habitat and saving the birds. And that's what the trail does, like when it's upgraded. And the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service has a restoration plan for the Rusty Patch, and it says to do all the things that we have been doing. But when I pointed out to the Rushline people that this endangered bumblebee was here, and they sent me the emails in 2019 from the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service. The Fish and Wildlife Service said, oh, just mow all the flowers before you bulldoze it. And that goes against their own plan. So, next slide. So, and there's all kinds of new data that forests and trees play a bigger role in pollinator survival than what people thought. That's just from this year. So anyways, thanks for listening about Rusty Patch bumblebees. This is a map showing, because I was asked to talk about the ones I've seen along the Vento Trail. You can see the trail, that white line, and then the 13 and the 8 are up at the Poor Farm Cemetery, and then the 5, 1, 3, and 1, 2, and the 18, they're up at Keller and down to Phelan, and then there's 12 at our house and 16 at Ames Lake, and then it goes on from there, including some over on the other side of 35E. And other people have seen them in this area. The Bee Lab has a program where if you survey in certain areas, especially, and it includes most of Maplewood, and you see a Rusty Patch, you can get a T-shirt just like mine. So, thank you.
Thank you, Kathy. And you brought up a couple of very important things that I really want to highlight. One is that we hear over and over again that the Bruce Vento Trail, that the trees along there are just scrap trees, that they're not the type of prestigious trees that we envision as humans, like the big oaks and the big whatever trees. And what they're finding with the science is that it's all types of trees are important, including the smaller trees or the trees that maybe at one point in time people thought were scrub trees, that they're all important trees. And another reason why this is very important, and I'm going to use the overhead camera here, is that we all know that this is what the Bruce Vento Trail looks like. And with the construction of the purple line, this is from the construction book of the Ramsey County plans that has been on the books for a long time. It means clear cutting the Bruce Vento Trail 100 feet across, 100 feet across. And that's very substantial. And we all know that there's an established tree canopy there. And Maplewood being a green step city, this is a very important step for Maplewood to have attained the status of being a green step city, in that when you get up to the higher steps, there are criterias and metrics that you have to meet. One of them being tree canopy is a major part of a city's green infrastructure, delivering many financial, energy, quality of life, and carbon sequestration benefits that can be calculated by iTree and are well documented in the Green Step website. Now, one thing that I want to show here is that if you start from Larpenter, and you want to take a look at what does it mean to the tree canopy to cut 100-foot swath across there. You see here, Google Earth can calculate what 100 feet is. Okay, this is the Bruce Vento Trail. Here's Larpenter down here, and this is where it first crosses into Maplewood. Okay, that 100-foot clear cut, there you go. It's that whole tree canopy. That's what that means. Now we get over there by Weaver School, let's take a look. There you can see that again, that 100-foot swath. Now let's move up a little further to Harvest Park. Take a look at that 100-foot swath, and you know, of course, it's not going to be clear and neat and clean, that there's going to be other, destruction of trees outside that 100-foot, because if you disturb roots of trees, they're going to die. So that's what this means. So let's go a little further along. Here's up just south of County Road C, where the new development of senior housing has gone in. Take a look at that. Okay, and this is up by Beam Avenue, where, again, they're going to have to take in probably more than 100 feet, because we all know that there's a big slope there, because this is the bridge that goes over Beam Avenue. And you wouldn't have a bridge there if you didn't have a big slope, right? So, and then this area here, is the city's neighborhood preserve that is green space. So when they go and they swoosh there, well, that's exactly what that means. And so what I would recommend, what the city needs to do, because tree canopy is one of the metrics that they had to measure and that they had to attest to, that they support, is that in this document from the Green Step City, there is a way that they can go and they can do an tree canopy calculation. And it gives the description here of exactly what can be done. And so they can actually take the 100-foot clearance area along the whole Bruce Vento right-of-way and calculate how much tree canopy will actually be lost, and then determine whether or not, if that is in Maplewood's best interest, to lose that kind of tree canopy and the type of environmental impact it's going to have. Next, we're going to have Dave Nelson come up, and he's going to talk about another endangered species. And of course, Dave is also a master naturalist, just like Kathy is.
If you can remember back when you were a child, what was it like for you to hold your first butterfly in your hand? I know it might be hard to think back that far, but I mean, now that the monarch butterfly is on the endangered list, and that's been within a year and a half because of man's past practice of weed killers and pesticides and that. And how many remember picking the largest dandelion for your mother or grandmother? The biggest bouquet. You brought that in, and they were proud just to receive it. And that, where else would you find flowers but in the woods, on the trail or in the woods? Or the biggest bouquet of red clovers for mom? Let's not take this pleasure away from the young people coming up. And that Maplewood has the best and most used trail in the state, and it is close to everyone. You know, for me, I'm in North St. Paul, it's close for me, and the people in St. Paul, everybody can take and enjoy the trail. Sure beats a city park with picnic benches.
Steve, can we widen out to see this whole thing, please?
These are some of the birds that can be on the trail that you'll see. You can see with your naked eye or with field glasses. Walking the trail, you may see some of the common birds. You may see an eagle feeding or in the treetops. And there is eagles around here because I've seen them quite a few times already. There are just a few birds you must see with the naked eye or field glasses. Woodpeckers, many types play part of our ecosystem. Let's not destroy the tree canopy. Now, cottonwood trees, box elders, some of the other trees that people don't want in their yards, these are the ones that's part of the ecosystem. The woodpecker on the top left, that bird landed 4 feet from me. I took a picture of it. I had to move real slow in order to get the picture on my camera. When I was young, and I was very lucky to have a woods to play in. Nowadays, the closest thing the young people have is a trail like the Bruce Reynolds Trail to play in and explore nature, birds, wildflowers, maybe a salamander, toad, field mice, and even a gardener snake. Let's not take this away from the future generation. And that when I was younger, playing in the woods, I had the lucky part of playing with the fawns, the deer, even some fox, pheasants, and that. And I know some people don't like a pet field mouse, but I had one. And buses never take the place of a wonderful walking trail, nature in your backyard. I live in North St. Paul. The 64 bus comes through there. It stops in North St. Paul. Students can, they said they wanted the buses for the students to go to college. They can transfer to the 219 that goes directly to the college and then to the Maplewood Mall. And the bus stops on Sepulveda and right in front of the Holiday Station. The pictures that you see, I just learned that by looking at this, that the monarch butterfly is our state butterfly, and it's on an endangered list. Also, the turtle up above is a blanding turtle. That turtle is so protected that if you see it in the wild, you're not allowed to pick it up. Our conservation officer has to handle it. But the conservation officer says if you see that turtle on the street, crossing the street or something, they will not say anything. They'll turn their head for you to take it and put it on the other side. That turtle has been sighted in Maplewood and North St. Paul, off of Holloway going into Maplewood. This was about 10 years ago, 11 years ago. Cliff Eichinger from the Watershed is the one who's cited it, recorded it, and that. So with our state butterfly and the turtle and that, I wouldn't want to see in the tree canopy for the birds there. We got to certain trees right now that our birds need for the ecosystem, especially for the woodpeckers, because not many people's going to put a cottonwood in their front yard, or they're going to have maybe blooming trees or shrubs or something like that. But I mean, we need to save the trail for the future generation, for the kids coming up. Let them enjoy it. Some of us, we're enjoying it now, but I hate to see it go away, and that because our kids need to enjoy what we enjoyed. So, thank you.
Next, we're going to have Sue Samuelson come up, and she is a lifelong resident of Maplewood, and she has seen the Bruce Vento Trail before it was the Bruce Vento Trail. And thank you, Sue.
Yeah, you bet.
Do you need any AV?
No, I don't. Hi, everyone. My name is Sue, like Diana said, and I am in my 49th year of teaching, and I teach physical education and health, and I have been in, I think, 9 or 10 different schools now. And anyway, I love my job, and I'm still hanging in there with it, even though the kids are work, But so when I got this invite to, did you want me to stand right in front of it?
You go, we're gonna change it.
Okay. When I got this invite, I'm kind of going like, well, why me? And I know a few things, and I don't know if you have ever discovered an author that you didn't maybe know before, and you start reading what they write, and you kind of go, this really makes sense. This really feels like a sort of person who can write the way I think. And I sort of stumbled on that person, and her name is Connie Schultz, and she is a Pulitzer Prize-winning columnist and author of the New York Times best-selling novel, The Daughters of Erie-Town. She's a professional in residence in the journalism school of her alma mater, Kent State University. Well, when I read this article that she had written, she started out with, one of my mother's greatest joys was to be complimented on the manners of her children. Well, that was okay. No matter the group, she told me to wear my best and bring my top shelf manners. Always, she insisted I was to represent, just that word, represent. I didn't think many of the working class families in my hometown cared that I was giving speeches, but she said every time I was lucky enough to be in front of a microphone, I should act as they did. And to this day, her lesson holds. And I did go back and look at some of her other articles, and they're great. Again, it's Connie Schultz. And then her mom said, good prevails when good people refuse to be silent. When we represent, as my mom would say, you can't buy class, my father used to say, true, but you can borrow it. My husband, Steve, and I have lived at 2747 Hazelwood Street. We are 7 houses south of St. John's Hospital on the west side, across from the Markham sign of apartments that are across from us. Our house was probably built in the very early 1900s, and it started out as a one-room cabin, and my grandpa and my dad continued adding on to the house. That's why none of the windows match and none of the ceilings match and so on. But anyway, and then they actually dug the basement by hand, if you can imagine. It's just like crazy when I look at what they did. And my grandpa was a master carpenter, and he emigrated from Sweden when he was 16 years old, and he worked at the Emporium downtown St. Paul. Some of you might remember the name. It went from the Emporium to Donaldson's, was it? And then to Dayton's? Did it go to Dayton's after that? I don't remember. But anyway, he was a master woodworker. And so that's why our house is the way it is. And it's on these 4 acres of beautiful property that kind of line up with everybody else on Hazelwood. They used to be farms. And I don't even know how many. When I looked at a plot, it was a whole bunch of them went all the way from Hazelwood Street back to the Bruce Van Trail. And we all, on our street, we all absolutely love that area back there. And the people that, if you remember, and Kathy, I don't know, you might remember this, when you guys kind of pushed against the, oh gosh, what was it? The
golf course?
No, the not making a dump, but a compost, I think. The compost across the street from Costco. There are people here tonight that were in that group because of how that changed their lives. So we've got some pretty active people around in our neighborhood, and we have been on the trail hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of times. We can bike to anywhere from our driveway, going across the street and linking up to the trail. We can go to St. Paul, we can go to Stillwater, we can go north of Matamidi, we can go all the way up to Pine Point. So, I mean, the trail for us is just, it's just wonderfully fun. And over all the years, I taught for quite a while at Mounds Park Academy, just, what direction? There. And we had a class called Lifetime Fitness. And while we were there, we had someone bring some rollerblades for the kids, and we actually took our senior students and we rollerbladed from where Mounds Park was, and we picked up the trail just down here, and then we followed it all the way, and then we took it all the way past our property, and then we came back and did that. We have seen people running, walking, and people stop to talk. And that's what I love. They stop to talk in small groups. And we can't minimize those relationships, and we can't minimize those conversations and those person-to-person meetings that happen on the trail. People bring their strollers out and their kids. And there are groups of folks that are birders, and there are lots of little kids learning to bike. Now, I'm not going to like that trail so much if I'm going to have to even feel the whoosh of any bus sort of thing. I don't even want to feel that. I don't want our families to not bring their little kids because they're worried if they're going to run in front of the steps of the bus or something related to something being very dangerous for them. And you know, there are families that have 4 or 5 kids, and you can't watch all of them at once. And so I would worry about little kids if we were going to be on the trail. I have seen so many very cool things happening at Harvest Park. And of course, you get on the trail and then you go south. It goes south, and Harvest Park is right there. Now, I know that there is a proposal to have a flat parking space, but that would be right where the tennis courts are and the pickleball courts. When you go to Harvest Park, you see everything from get-togethers to soccer to volleyball to what else have I seen? Tennis, picnics, kids playing in the woods, and so on. And I went out there one night, and there was this like entire volleyball tournament going on. This was in the summer. And I looked, I had never seen, I think there were 24 nets. And these were like high school volleyball players that were playing outdoor volleyball, and they were having a tournament. And those nets and those courts were marked out there for those kids. Then on one entire side were the parents and the families, and they were cooking ethnic meals for the kids. And you could walk along there and they would love to tell you what they had cooked and how their kids like it and that sort of thing. Again, those are things you can't replicate when you take away parts of what is very special to families. And let's see, I think that was that part of there. Our experience in the back of our property has been incredibly full of wildlife, what we've seen tonight. We've had owls, we've had owlets, we've had a yearling owl, or whatever it's called, that got itself sitting in the tall brush at the bottom of the hill. And it didn't know what to do when my daughter and I walked down there, except, so I got on the phone, I called the Raptor Center. Well, they said, does it appear to be injured? And I said, well, no. And they said, well, just move away and keep an eye on it. And sure enough, it flew away, but it didn't know to do that when we were standing there. We've had coyotes, of course. One of them ripped my dog's hind leg open, and they didn't even pay for the stitches. We've had deer bedding down at the bottom of our back hill, and we can look out there and we can see anywhere from 4 to 6 to 8 deer. You have to look a little carefully, of course, because they're good at camouflaging. We had a red-tailed hawk that actually died on our property, we think, because we found it in the snow, that was barely left under a tree in the back. And there didn't appear to be anything wrong with it. And so I took it up to oh gosh, what is the camp that is connected with the Raptor Center also? It's up north where the kids go sometimes. Say it again? I don't think that was it. I can't remember. It's on Granite Lake, maybe? Anyway, I took it up there because they had the legal paperwork that you need to have to maintain one. And they actually took parts of that bird's body, and then our school went up there for an overnight a month later. And here were that hawk's legs and wings and stuff. So it got put to really good use. And we've had ospreys and bald eagles there. And it is just so beautiful, and it's so calming, and it's such a wonderful place. I really believe that it's very important that all of us do our darndest to educate ourselves so we know what the pros and cons and all of that are, and then keep a good eye on how these steps are happening so that we are up and up on what is going on. A few other quotes from Connie Schultz. She wrote, "Let us, the good people, refuse to be silent. We can raise children to care about the world around them." And she wrote an article on a baseball game between the Guardians and the Yankees. And she wrote a couple sentences, and this is what it was. It was really cool. I've never heard anybody put this to words before. It was the kind of game that made friends of strangers and converted non-believers. And I think that's what's happening on our trail a lot of times. You end up coming up to somebody, you talk, and all of a sudden that used to be stranger feels like a friend to you. We could forget about the news and political ads and all the bills and deadlines. Time and time again, we rose to our feet to cheer on the Guardians. And that was the one game they won in that playoff series. So anyway, I have nothing else to share, but I just want you to know that if I ever see you on the trail, please call me out so we can chat a bit.
I got you. Okay. Steve, is this you? This is you? Yeah, Peter.
Steve, how you doing, my man? Can we get the laptop?
Just did it. Like tapping the middle.
All right. Good evening. My name is Peter Nelson, and I'm a senior policy fellow at Center of the American Experiment. We're an organization that's been around since 1990, and we're a public policy organization that focuses on researching and writing about top issues and problems that are facing Minnesota. And this includes issues relating to the economy, education, healthcare, family, and state and local governance. And when we look at our work, we really emphasize how policy solutions need to emphasize free enterprise, limited government, personal responsibility, and government accountability, and how all of that contributes to sound public policy solutions. My own personal background, I've been around public policy my entire career. I've spent most of my career looking at data and analyzing how that data should inform public policy problems in Minnesota. However, most recently I moved to Washington, D.C. and worked for the Centers for Medicare and Medicaid Services and did a lot of work on the regulatory agenda related to healthcare policy in health insurance and health insurance exchanges. And in that role, I actually worked a lot with data and learned how the federal government works with data and pulls in data from insurance companies and from state insurance exchanges. But since 2021, I've been back in Minnesota, and I'm back working at Center of the American Experiment. And in that role, I managed some projects also outside of the healthcare space, and one of those projects was related to transportation. And in this transportation work, we started looking at some data sources, and one of the data sources we looked at was a data source that's provided by the Federal Transit Administration. And this is data that shows information about crime on transit across the country. And it's data that's collected under a federal law, and it's data that the federal law that the Transit Administration goes out to transit organizations across the country, and they give them methodologies that they're supposed to follow to make sure that the information that's collected is uniform, to basically develop a data set that can help us understand trends across the country, trends within communities, and one of the key data set elements related to crime is data that talks about personal security events. And that's what this first slide is looking at right here. It's looking at personal security events, and it's based on the per billion passenger miles on light rail transit. And we look at this just so we have to equalize things to look at a rate so we can compare different cities across the country. And in this slide, we're comparing personal security events on Metro Transit in the Twin Cities to the U.S. average. Now, what are personal security events? Personal security events are an interesting metric when you were talking about crime in the Twin Cities here. Personal security events are pretty serious security events that happen. This isn't just any old crime. This is a crime that actually basically results in some sort of injury to the victim. It's an assault, it's a robbery that leads to a serious injury or an injury that requires immediate medical attention. So it's a smaller number of crimes, but these are the serious crimes. And when we look at this crime rate, we see on Metro Transit that this rate jumped in 2019 substantially. It was a very large jump, and we didn't see the same sort of jump across the country. And again, when we're comparing apples to apples here, when we're looking at this rate, and you have to start asking yourself some questions on what caused this increase. And this next slide shows the differences across cities. And it shows just how much more crime based on this metric is happening on Metro Transit in the Twin Cities versus any other city. The Twin Cities has about double the rate of Houston, the next closest city. And every other city down the line is much, much lower than the light rail system in the Twin Cities. This next slide looks at bus, because we're talking about bus rapid transit here. So I did a little more investigation earlier this week and broke it down by bus transit, because for our report that we put out, we really only looked at light rail transit. But when you look at bus transit, we see the same picture here. We see a big spike in these personal security events that happened in 2019. And it's carried forward into 2020 and 2021. And an important point to make here about 2019 is that it's before the riots that transpired after George Floyd was killed. And it's also before COVID came on, when ridership tumbled basically across all transit systems across the country. So this is the bus rapid transit. And I've got a couple slides here to add some context to these first two slides. These first two slides showed this dramatic increase, but this slide shows a little more context, and it shows just how dramatically higher light rail transit crime rate is to every other country, like the other slide showed, but also to bus rapid transit as well. And so we're not seeing the exact same level of crime on the bus system as we are on the light rail system. However, I think it's important to point out on this slide that when you look at the Metro Transit bus system, it's still in this city higher than the light rail crime rate across the U.S., and it's also higher than the U.S. bus system. This next slide adds some further context, and the one important thing this adds is the number of crimes. So we've been talking about the crime rate for all those previous slides. When you look at the number of crimes, it's not surprising that it follows the same sort of trend. But when you do look at this number, when you look at the bus, it jumps up to about 60 events in 2019. Now that's maybe not a large number, but these are serious crimes. And when you understand the serious nature of these crimes do reflect, I think, what's happening along our transit systems starting really in 2019 and moving forward. We've heard the reports from the Star Tribune, we've heard reports from other news sources on how our light rail systems and our bus systems have been sort of deteriorating. They don't have the same comfort level and ridership experience that we expect from the system. And I think that those issues are borne out in this data that we're presenting here today. Before I get into this slide, I want to mention something that we heard a presentation from the Met Council in the prior meeting. And in that presentation, they suggested that maybe one of the reasons why that number is so much larger on the Metro Transit system is because they're more transparent and they're reporting more of this information. I want to go back and reference the fact that this is federal data that is created for the purposes of comparing transit systems. So I'm doubtful that that's the case. It's maybe a plausible reason why there's a difference in the Twin Cities versus some of these other towns. However, while plausible, without any further data, I'm highly suspicious that that's actually what's going on here, because federal data is usually collected in a very uniform way, and without any other information, I kind of doubt that's the case. But more importantly, when you look at the trend over time just in the Twin Cities, and assuming we report the data year after year after year in the same way, we see that that trend jumped up in 2019. So our own reporting shows a huge uptick in crime in 2019. And I think that's maybe the most important take-home data point for this presentation. And it was also suggested by the Met Council that when we look at crime issues right now, it's mostly non-dangerous crimes, crimes related to drug use and homelessness. And that may be true when you look at just the change between 2021 and 2022. However, when we look at over a longer period of time, we're seeing these more dangerous crimes taking place on the transit system. And this slide, I decided, okay, well, let's look at another data source. And I had some problems finding this data because the Metro Transit doesn't report a lot of this data like I would hope. But these are the aggravated assaults and robberies that Metro Transit Police report. And these are this is the data they report to the FBI and the Minnesota Bureau of Criminal Apprehension. When you look at this data, it shows a very similar trend. It shows an uptick of crime from 2016 to 2019. It's a little more gradual uptick, but it is nonetheless a substantial increase in crime over this time period. And when you look at this, it suggests that something is going wrong on our transit system. And that what that might be, when you look at our transit system, I do believe that there's a management issue going on right now with Metro Transit. And our organization has taken a strong opinion on the Metropolitan Council. We look at the governance structure of the Metropolitan Council, and we see a governance structure that doesn't make the Met Council accountable to the communities it represents. The Metropolitan Council is appointed fully by the governor of Minnesota. It's not an elected position. It's not appointed by the communities that it serves. It's appointed by the governor. And we've seen repeatedly issues with accountability in that regard. And we've seen mismanagement. We've all seen in the news how the Southwest Light Rail system is over budget and well past the time where it should have been built. And so we're seeing these mismanagement issues. We're seeing other accountability issues. And when you reflect on all of that, it really always kind of comes back to this governance structure where the Met Council isn't accountable to the people it serves. And I mentioned the fact that American Experiment has talked about these issues in the past before. We issued a report in 2003 that discussed some better ways for the Met Council to be governed. We also issued a report in 2014 that mentioned ways that the Met Council should be better governed. That included giving the legislature authority over its budget, but none of this has taken place. And so with that, with understanding that, and because the Met Council members are all appointed by the governor, they do not represent nor are accountable to the communities they oversee. And so these days, the Met Council really tends to represent the interests and values from our core cities, Minneapolis and St. Paul. And moreover, this lack of accountability is a key reason, again, as I mentioned, behind this track record of mismanagement. Bringing a Met Council project into your community means you're bringing in their values and their record of mismanagement. Ultimately, that means you really should consider the merits of the project very carefully. Based on the community engagement that I'm seeing here today and that I saw previously in the last meeting, I do think that's exactly what you're doing right now. So I applaud you for the engagement that I see here today. This is exactly what needs to happen to make a good choice on this project. And with that, I will conclude my presentation, and I'm open to any questions.
Yeah, that's right. Oh, sure. Oh, okay, thank you. I'll be using the overhead. And thank you, Peter, for coming tonight. We do have some extra copies of his article in the back of the room there, perhaps. So if you need a copy of it, maybe there's still some back there. Now, you're probably wondering, there's been this poster here sitting on the poster board for a while, and you're all wondering, what are all those dots? Well, at the No Rush Line Coalition, we have been busy trying to find out information about the community here in Maplewood and outside of Maplewood that is concerned about the BRT and the Bruce Vento Trail, and who have felt like they really haven't been part of that process in giving input. Because while Ramsey County did indeed have a lot of pop-ups and engagements and whatever, most people walked away from those feeling like they were never heard, because they never heard any of the results of any of it other than, oh, everybody's for the project. And so we wanted to find out what does the public really feel. And so we had actually a lot of pop-ups ourselves. And many of you, of course, that's how we got to meet you, is through our pop-ups. And we had comment cards, which our people that stopped by and gave us input, that they filled out. Well, this is a map of probably about 75% of those orange cards that were filled out and that were sent to elected officials to inform elected officials about how the public felt. Now, the reason I say it's not 100% is because, well, we're an all-volunteer organization, and, well, one of our data entry people had something else come up where she wasn't able to continue to keep putting in the entries. But this gives you an idea of the kind of documentation that we have. Another effort that we did is that we heard time and time again that there were studies about ridership and about what what people were looking for in transit. And yet there was never really any demonstrated documentation about what kind of transit are residents of Maplewood and surrounding communities, what are they looking for? So we actually developed a transit survey card, and we tried to make it as neutral as possible, and also to be able to give good information in a short amount of time so that people didn't feel like they were filling out 4 pages of survey. But here's what our little card looks like. Maybe we can zoom in on it so that way you can read what it says. It's very simple, and I think you'll agree with me that it is a pretty neutral survey in that there's 4 different age brackets so that way you can select which age bracket you're in. There's also then whether or not do you use a car. It doesn't ask if you own a car. It asks if you use a car, because sometimes people don't own cars, but they still use cars. Another question is, and maybe what I'll do is I'll read this here, is that do you work in NA, meaning maybe you're retired or you don't work, St. Paul, Maplewood, White Bear Lake, or other? That was always another question we had. The people that are going to use this, where do they work? Where are they going? Where do they work? Here's a good question, very pertinent to riding the bus. Would you walk up to 3 blocks to or from a bus stop? Simply yes, no, unable. To get to medical or other health care appointments, do you use the public bus? Yes or no? Do you use Metro Mobility? Yes or no? If the cost was the same for you, which transport would you prefer to use? Bus service with handicap accessible bus stops, the description of a BRT, yes or no? Or curb-to-curb transport, such as Metro Mobility, Transit Link, New Tracks, like what Mr. Tim David was describing earlier on. Yes, no. And then simply their name, the city, and their email. That's it. So what are the results? Well, ta-da! Let's find out what those results show us. And I think you're going to find this very interesting. Is that, and we're not done yet with our, with this survey, because obviously there's a lot more people to survey in all of this. So as we're looking at this, you can see that we've got 321 surveys were completed. How that breaks down is that 205 of them are female. Oh, okay. 205 of them are female, 78 are male, and then there were another 38 that we did not know or they did not answer. And then in the age categories, the millennials, there were 32 millennials. In the category of age 36 to 55, there were 33. The age category of 56 to 70, 76. And then people who are 70 years or older, 180. Now, I got to tell you is that we went to apartment buildings, we went to senior high-rises, we went to single homes. We have people from all different kinds of housing stock as part of this survey. Places of employment, about 196 said that they didn't have employment that they were going to. 19 work in St. Paul, 26 work in Maplewood, 27 in White Bear Lake, 49 somewhere else, and then there were about 10 people or so who said that they work at multiple locations. And then you can see the listing there of all the towns of different people came from. Most notably, Maplewood, 111 people in Maplewood answered this survey. So that gives you an idea of the impact of the Maplewood on this survey. So Maplewood residents are a full third. Now, in looking at the results from the different age categories, I think some of this you might find interesting and fascinating because we hear a lot about about who's going to, use the bus? Well, first of all, we looked at it as a composite of the whole group all together. So those that would walk 3 blocks to a bus stop, about 21.5% said they would walk 3 blocks to a bus stop. 64% said no, they're not going to walk 3 blocks to the bus stop. And then there are about 14% that says they're unable. When it comes to using the bus to go to medical appointments, wow, there were 8 people who said they used the bus to get to medical appointments. Now, we've heard how the BRT is going to serve people to be able to go to their doctor appointments, medical appointments. Well, currently, right now, out of our survey, only 8 people use the bus to go to the doctor. Also, in looking at Metro Mobility, you can see that there is usage of Metro Mobility. 11% of our sample uses Metro Mobility. And then and looking at which type of transport they would prefer if the cost was the same, and comparing a BRT bus to a curb-to-curb transport, if the costs were the same, overwhelmingly the response was 61% would prefer the smaller, more flexible transit options. Next here, then, when we look at the millennials, well, with the millennials, 97% own a car. And if you look at how many of them would walk 3 blocks to a bus stop, only 15%. When it comes to using the bus to go to a doctor's appointment, 0. And if they were going to have a choice of transport and didn't matter what the cost, if the cost was all the same to them, 0 said that they would choose the bus. 15% said they might be interested in that curb-to-curb service, but all the rest of them said, other than there were, I guess, 9% that said they would maybe consider both, but all the rest of them said, no, they want to stick to their car. And yet we hear time and time again in other metro cities that the millennials are ditching their car. We need to do, of course, more sampling of the millennials in our community, because this is only a certain sample, but this is what the trends are at this point. And these are, just people that are, around in our community that answered the survey. Going to the next category, the 36 to the 55-year-olds, again, you can see what the statistics are there. Again, 94% use a car. The percentage of those that would walk the 3 blocks to a bus stop is 30%, goes up. And again, the curb-to-curb transport is the preferred alternative over the big BRT. Now when we get to the next category of the 56 to 70-year-olds, now these folks, their percentage of those that would walk to a bus stop 3 blocks has gone up a little bit. So they are at 34%. So they're the ones that are most likely to walk the 3 blocks. Of all of the 4 categories, this is the age category most likely to walk the 3 blocks. But yet, when asked what is their preference for transit, comparing a BRT to the smaller, more customized transit, curb to curb, again, that was 55%. So that is, again, the preferred transit, which is in line with the options that Mr. David had indicated earlier, were the options that we've been researching that we think are good options for Maplewood. And then when we get to the 70-year-plus folks, well, 78% of them have their car. And 13% will walk the 3 blocks to a bus. But when you get down to are they going to use a bus to get to their medical appointments, you got 0.5%. They're not going to use a bus to get to their medical appointments. And of course, they're the biggest category of people answering the survey. And then when it comes to the preference of a bus over the curb-to-curb services, 58%. Now, the reason I'm bringing this up about the 3 blocks is that, you know, that seems very reasonable, 3 blocks. And yet, most of the studies having to do with ridership are actually greater than 3 blocks. So if we would have asked people, would you walk 6 blocks? Do you think our numbers would go up or would go down? I'll leave you to think of that. But here's something I want you to also realize, is that certainly many of the members up here at the on our council tables here are aware of the Transit Way Impacts Research program. This was done in conjunction with researching for the Rush Line and for the Gold Line. And what's important about this, and it goes right to the heart of how data is used, is that there are quotes that are taken from this booklet that where stage 1 uses a half-mile radius of where the residents live from the transit stop of the lines B, D, and E. Okay, that's a half mile. That's, like I said, you know, that's a lot longer than the 3 blocks we asked people about. And then, whereas in stage 2, the study uses a 2-mile radius for the Gold Line and the Rush Line transit stops. So you see they're using a different standard, 2 miles, not a half a mile, when it comes to looking at the distance that people have to go to get to that stop. And then it says here that from the introduction, the accessibility to jobs, grocery stores, healthcare facilities, and high schools are compared before and after the Gold and Rush lines are added to the network. Blocks located within 2 miles of the proposed Gold and Rush Purple Line corridors are included in the second stage evaluation. That's 2 miles. A 2-mile radius is 16 times the area of a half-mile radius, and the average person can walk a half a mile in 10 minutes. Therefore, a person would take 40 minutes to walk 2 miles. It is hard to imagine anybody walking 40 minutes to a healthcare facility or a grocery store or a high school or a job. And so when we're talking about this particular route up and down the Bruce Vento Trail, you have to understand the standards that they're using and at what cost. And so it's very important, and this is what's going to lead then into Mr. David's presentation, is that, you see, he's going to talk about some alternatives. And we've got to, here's the overhead. Okay. Somewhere here. There we go. So you see, here's Highway 61. And Highway 61, over here we've got Menards, which has built their brand new big building, which is going to have a lot of jobs. It's going to be a job generator for Maplewood. And that's where they are. You see, if the Rush Line or the Purple Line stays where it is, the closest bus stop to that Menards is over here by over here by Harvester Park, where they're going to put that parking lot, right? Well, how are people going to walk from there to get to Menards? Wouldn't it be better to have your BRT going up Highway 61 and actually having a stop there at Menards rather than at the park where there's nothing there and people can never get to Menards to get to work? Also, we've got Costco here, and we heard the the fellow at the last presentation saying that, that the route for the Bruce Vento Trail rush line was before Costco went in. Well, here's Costco. Costco's there now. So you see Costco and Highway 61. We've got jobs along here. We've got jobs along here. There aren't any jobs along the residential areas of Maplewood and the Bruce Vento Trail. Mr. Tim David.
So I just want to, for the task force members, so we're at 93 minutes. So you're 3 minutes over, but I said at the beginning we'd have some flex time.
We started a couple minutes late.
We did. We started at 6:06. So you got it.
So we'll be wrapping up now.
Please.
Okay. And I appreciate everybody's patience and attention. It's a very, very important topic. Yeah, if you pop up. Yeah, let me do.
Steve, can we get the?
I have one.
And you got the overhead. Forget it, Steve. We need the overhead. There you go. Any overhead. All right.
So we will wrap up with just a couple additional topics. I'll just touch on this again that Diana mentioned, this concept of routing. We certainly do recommend the use of existing roadways. We really believe those bus routes on existing roadways can be adjusted based on changing community needs, whether it's the building of a new employer or some other different change in our transit needs. It saves the Bruce Vento Trail. It allows funding to be used for the other alternatives, such as smaller connector buses. Apply some of that funding savings into metro mobility, into new tracks, some of those other solutions that we've talked about, if you use existing roadways. If the Purple Line project were constructed on the fixed bus guideway along BVT, it would take years to implement and be extremely disruptive. Using existing roadways can be done much more immediately. This is a quick graphic. It's quite clear. You have major roadways that move north and south, Highway 61. That could be the arterial BRT. You could also move buses up White Bear Avenue. You could move buses east and west on Frost. You could have shorter buses to match lower ridership numbers. MnDOT is currently working on redeveloping Arcade. We believe Met Council and MnDOT can work together to develop the route. Bike lanes could be on the current Bruce Vento Trail. We really feel these routes would be more inclusive for residents and businesses. Beam Avenue is available. Metro State and Metro State and Century College could be linked by local connectors on Arcade, 61, White Bear Avenue. All right. Now if we could pull up. Yep. All right. All right. I'm going to present a legislative update. It was mentioned that there are some items being considered at the state legislature, and we want the city of Maplewood to be aware there's significant legislation being proposed at both the state House and Senate that may dramatically change the Met Council and how they conduct their business. We want you to also be aware that it's not just your community that is struggling with how transit should look in the future. There are organized groups in the Southwest metro area, the Northwest metro area, and of course, our Northeast metro area. They are opposing the Southwest Light Rail project, which was referenced, and folks are reading about that in the paper. It is a $2.75 billion transit project, 10 years behind schedule, and it has been described by legislators as the Minneapolis boondoggle. Their words, not mine. And there are groups opposing the Blue Line Light Rail extension into Minneapolis, Robbinsdale, and Crystal because of undesirable routes and safety concerns. So with that said, I'll call out a couple of the key legislation bills that are being discussed at the House and the Senate currently in the transportation committees.
Just hold your finger on that, and you can highlight it.
Okay.
If you want, you got like a mini Hollywood thing going.
Okay, cool. Okay, the first one, and this has support, bipartisan support, both aisles. Met Council board members are elected. We talked about accountability. part of the reason why we have to have this conversation here is many of the communities don't feel the Met Council is listening to stakeholders, and you folks are the stakeholders, the communities are the stakeholders. And it's also not just us activists and residents and businesses who are saying that. State legislators such as Scott Dibble and Frank Hornstein, each of those are the chairs of the Senate and the House Transportation Committee, have gone on record as saying the Met Council won't even listen to them. Okay? So this is very active legislation for the Met Council board members to be elected. You folks would get to decide who those board members are. Very significant. Accountability. There are a number of bills at the legislature, both DFL supported and GOP supported, to instill more accountability. I'm going to call out a couple of them in the yellow. Southwest Light Rail, it's not you folks, but it's an indication how significant those projects are being mismanaged, that it is intended to limit the amount of dollars that can be spent on that project, because they currently are more than $1 billion over the project. Municipal approval of guideway plans. That would include things such as the Purple Line. Just to be aware, every resolution and motion that has been enacted by these cities in the northeast part of the Twin Cities here opposing the Purple Line, there is no state law to prevent the Met Council from saying, we don't care. Literally. We think it would be a PR nightmare, and they have respected those actions so far, but there's no state law that says they have to abide by what a municipality says. This legislation has strong support, and it would provide for requirement that the city that's being impacted would have to approve of the project. Okay. There is HF 1741, Metro Council requested a report on use of transportation sales tax proceeds for guideways. You all have been taxed for a number of years to pay for transit that isn't even built. There's no requirement for that to be reported. This bill would provide for that. Okay. Highlighted in yellow, the following ones. Cost-benefit analysis required. The Met Council can propose a project and not have to validate that there is a cost versus benefit. This is a pretty significant miss, if you will. There's a House bill and a Senate bill being proposed that a cost-benefit analysis would be required, and that has strong legs. We think that's going to pass. Use of alternative transit solutions, we talked about this. There are bills in both the House and the Senate. That Metro Mobility Service Area expansion provided and money appropriated. This is great. This is an example of good transit if it's funded properly and the service reaches those people who are transit needy. Microtransit, rideshare pilot program. We talked about some of those microtransit that Met Council provides and is piloting on demand. That is proposed to be expanded. We think that's very positive. Study of post-COVID, I should do my little pointer. Bottom one, study of post-COVID transit needs / ridership. Require modification of a study on post-COVID pandemic public transportation. That simply says you need to reevaluate all your projects post-COVID. Just to be aware, everybody's aware, the Purple Line has been talked about for 20 years. That was the vision 20 years ago. The projections on the ridership were estimated long before COVID, and you folks are all aware how that has impacted ridership. Ridership is slowly coming back after COVID. They're at about 50% of what they were prior. And there's going to be stickiness to that lack of ridership. Met Council is aware of that. So this bill would require a study on ridership and other requirements around transit post-COVID. Very positive. Here's a simple one, safety category. HF 0697 and SF 730, Metropolitan Council requirement to publish monthly ridership numbers and quarterly crime statistics. Peter talked about his data. He gets a lot of that from FTA and other sources, but there is no requirement for the Met Council to report either its ridership or its crime statistics. These are things that deal with accountability also. We as the public, the paying public, you are paying for this transit, we should know those things. So that's both in the House and Senate. Next one, transit enforcement. governing requirements. This is additional requirements. I'm sorry, I can't remember what this one exactly right now. Oh, it's requiring a code of conduct for riders. Pretty good, right? Pretty significant. Yeah, so that's in play also. They're significant. Okay. So, as I said, these have bipartisan support. I just spent an hour and a half with the chair of the Transportation Committee at the House over the weekend. Strong support for these. Scott Dibble, the senator, chair of the Senate Transportation Committee, has repeatedly expressed his disdain toward the Met Council and their unaccountability and their inability to deliver on big transit projects. And he's a strong DFLer, which are typically pro-transit, and he is headed pretty much up to here. Things need to be refined, changed at Met Council, so I want the City of Maplewood to be aware, and residents be aware, there are potential changes coming to the Met Council to hopefully make them more accountable, more valid ridership, reevaluate all their projects, so it provides better transit to you folks. Okay, now I'm going to close. Okay, wrapping up. I will say thanks a lot for letting us present tonight. This is really a significant topic, and I applaud City of Maplewood for having this forum. As we've stated, our group is not opposed to public transit, but it needs to be a right fit for the community. We talked about transit solutions, and there are many that we believe do fit the community. We talked about why the current proposed Purple Line is not a good fit. It will destroy a top 10 trail. There are better use of resources using existing roadways and expand existing transit service. Better use of funds for the smaller, more flexible buses and routes, which provide curb-to-curb assistance and provide inclusivity and equality to all Maplewood residents and businesses. And I'll just insert it, the BVT is an incredible asset for the community that should not be lost. The tree canopy, the peace and quiet, all the discussion today. Residents walk, bike, jog, they visit with neighbors. How important is it? Here's some facts. Ramsey County Parks and Rec, in their last report on the use of the BVT, reported that there were 400,000 users of the trail over a 12-month period. That's a lot of folks who think it's an important resource the way it is. If the Met Council is allowed to clear cut thousands of trees, expand the corridor to 100 feet wide, and build a fixed bus guideway for 178 buses, we used to talk about 89 buses. If you're standing on that trail, though, it will be 89. 89 going north and 89 going south. If you allow that to happen on the BVT, you will never have that resource again. Anyone who thinks or says that it will still be the BVT, excuse me, but they're lying. The 400,000 people who use that trail now would stand alongside those 178 buses and say, no, this is not the BVT. The purple line on the BVT would be the Maplewood boondoggle. There are many transit solutions that should be used in Maplewood. And we also want to make a point of our coalition would like to recommend, based on the strength of this advisory committee already, that a formal transit needs study for Maplewood be conducted by an objective, professional transportation consulting firm. This firm should not be any organization that is funded or influenced by Met Council. It should be a third-party objective group. It should include a formal stakeholder engagement plan that is designed by the consultant and the city. Dollars for the study could come from transportation/infrastructure money that is from feds or get state dollars. There's transportation money out there. Let's use it for that right purpose before we put in a boondoggle. I'd also suggest that based on the strength of this forum, that a transit advisory committee be ongoing. Transit is not a one and done. It is a service that needs to be flexible and meet the changing needs of the community. And this type of advisory committee could significantly advise the council and mayor regarding ongoing, everyday changing transit needs and solutions. And you've started the conversation, You have an opportunity to really create a vibrant set of transit services that can be more effective and efficient for your community. And we think you owe it to your citizens to get transit that fits your community. So that's a wrap. Thank you.
Thank you, everybody, for this evening. Having extra flexibility in time always helps, but there is only 6 allotted minutes left officially in the 6 to 8 p.m. sort of window that we had. And so for the task force members, you may or may not have written down some questions. And so what I would encourage you to do as you reflect on the presentation and the information that you heard is to continue to think about what additional questions that you might have, what questions for clarity might you seek, and sometimes in a situation like this where there's sort of an exchange, you might say, boy, I'd really like to ask the Met Council a different question. And so if you have questions for either group, to write those down and send those and submit those either to me directly or to city staff, and so we can accumulate them. But what I would also would ask you to consider is, so what is the information that was most interesting to you, or something that stands out, or something that you'd like to learn more about that? Where was some information that you were surprised at hearing and you thought, oh, I want to maybe do some more research or would like to get some more information? So think about what those questions prompted. And then are there situations where you had information that was confirmed? Right, I thought one way, and boy, I really heard some data that confirmed that. So I know that that was a lot of information, and so that I appreciate your patience and in listening. I thought the group, and I want to thank Tim and Diana and Kathy and Dave and Sue and Peter for really organizing a really thoughtful discussion and dialogue. It did kind of cover the whole line, no pun intended, but it really covered the full line and really some thoughts and concerns. So rather than go through and sort of ask individual questions, what I would encourage you to do is use your note cards and write down those questions and submit them through. And to the community members, I want to say thank you for coming out. This is not what everybody does on a Tuesday night, so we appreciate this is what good community engagement looks like. It was robust, it was genuine, and it was informative, and people, I think, genuinely talked about things that were important to them. And I think we don't often create venues for people to share what's important to them. You all have a very difficult task ahead, sort of to think through what you heard and think those questions through. We do have an opportunity next Wednesday on the 8th to get some direct feedback from community members. But I will forecast if there's questions that come up and you want a question for Met Council staff, or you want a question for somebody from the Center of the American Experiment, we could invite them back to have them available if we know what those questions are in advance. And so that's why I encourage you to, as you have questions, as you're thinking things through, to bring them up, because we want to make sure that we provide a venue for people to have good information and good dialogue and feedback. I do have about 3 minutes. So I was just sort of, to the group, if there's any sort of comment or question that you want to identify in the last 3 minutes, I'm certainly willing to take that, and I'll just look to the group if anybody wants to weigh in. I'm going to go 1, 2, 3, 4. Yes.
Thank you. I will speak quickly. Thank you, everyone, for coming. It's been very informative. I had a question for Peter from the American Experience. Your last slide talked about offenses by city. What offenses? Is this the aggravated assault and robbery, or is it something else? It just said offenses by city.
I'll just write it down. I'll have you respond to that.
Okay.
Okay.
And I have one other question.
Certainly.
I know I had talked with Jane Coleus before. She had indicated that there was a survey done on the usage of the parking ramp over at the Maplewood Mall, and she had indicated that there was going to be some information about that shared, and I didn't see that information. I'd like to get that information because she said it does exist, so that would be helpful as well. And one other question. Examples of the arterial BRT. Thank you for bringing up the list of possible solutions. Where do we have arterial BRT? I couldn't think of, I guess I could look at the Metro Transit map, but where do we have something like that?
Okay. Thank you. Diana. Microphone, please. There we go.
There we go. Thank you. I know that you mentioned we're having a meeting on March 8th. When is our next meeting, and when does the advisory committee here, when do we have our meeting to deliberate on all of this and to understand what questions we're deliberating on?
So the next meeting is March 8th, 6 p.m. in this room, so next Wednesday. The second part of your question is it depends, and I talked to Tim today. I don't know if there are going to be 4 people who show up, or 40 people who show up, or 400 people who show up. So it may be a function of how many people want to provide feedback, because if there's time after in the 2-hour window, there could be some deliberations and discussions at the tail end of the meeting on the 8th. There is also time held for a meeting on potentially March 22nd, should you need that for additional deliberation and conversation. So, meeting next week at 6 p.m. in this room. We genuinely don't know who's going to show up, so it's one of those that we will adapt on the fly, if that's helpful.
Okay.
Okay. Councilmember Juniman, and then Councilmember Lee.
Thanks, Mike. First of all, I would like to thank you for the presentation. David, in particular, you were very helpful. And I want you to know that many of the questions you have are questions we still have, and that we were, to be blunt, grossly disappointed in Met Council's presentation. That was pathetic. So, so we have lots of questions that are unanswered. Many of them the same things you heard this evening. Our biggest goal is some kind of transit that works for this community. That's what we're after. And I think I would ask the facilitator, and I'm not kidding, sometimes I kid, this time I'm not, that I think both Met Council and Ramsey County Commissioners should be asked to view this tape. I think they need to know how this community feels. And they can say that, I don't care if they refuse to do it, I want them to have to refuse to do it, is kind of the point here. I said I wasn't being, I'm serious. I think they don't know what engagement looks like, so we could help them. And we have many of the same concerns you have. And so we are in a bind as to what do you do now, because we want transit. I'm hoping that if they can view some of this and see that the community cares, they will come back to perhaps the advisory committee and the council and say, okay, we need to talk. That's my fondest hope. Does that mean I'm going to get it? No, but I can hope. So thank you for your information, and please rest assured that we have just as many concerns as you do, and we were very disappointed in having no new information when they were here.
Yeah, I'm happy to answer any questions.
I'm going to go over
I'll
here
stay for a while,
next.
too.
Thank you, Mike. And just quick, just want to thank you all for being here tonight. I know, as Mike mentioned, Tuesday evening, it's amazing to see the community come together. So, and thanks to Diana, the coalition, Kathy, Sue, Tim, and Peter for the presentation tonight. Some of my questions, and we talk a lot about data, and data really comes from who is playing and watching and putting the data together. What's important for me, and with respect to all of the community member who has participated in the survey and looking at that map, what I'm really interested in are the people here in the city of Maplewood, what that looks like in the numbers. I know the numbers you showed show that there was 111 participants that participated in the survey. Can that be provided to us with just Maplewood data and statistics? And then in addition to that, earlier in the presentation, there were some numbers that about 6,000 people has signed a petition online, and about 1,500 has signed paper petition. About 100 businesses. I'm interested to see, of those petition signers, who of those are from Maplewood. Can that be something that is provided to the council to review, or the task force?
I don't know that I answered that question, but we'll
just throw it out there,
we'll throw that out there with the group. With the group. Amanda or Nick, final comments? Any comments?
No, just want to say thank you. I definitely learned a lot, especially about, the endangered species along the trail, and also just some of the business and job opportunity growth and where that is in comparison into the proposed route. So thank you, everyone. It was very informative.
Yeah, I think, thanks everybody tonight. I was struck by a couple things. That one slide with like what type of transit we wanted, all of that exists in Maplewood right now or is planned. So it's great that you're thinking about those different modes. There isn't one solution to transit. So I think what we could do is provide like where that exists, how it works. I think add that context for Metro Mobility and Transit Link, and we're building an ABRT in Maplewood in the next few years too, in addition to Purple Line. So that's great. And then also just a question for, it looks like a lot of the data tonight was a couple of years behind and there's been a lot of changes to the project. How do you want, as the facilitator of the group, to get some of that information updated? Just a lot of changes that are no longer from what was presented. So we could share that in a forum. We can update that. We can work with the group that presented tonight to point out the areas that, for example, the simplest one is bus type. We're not, the project doesn't have 60-foot buses anymore. It's got smaller buses. That's like an example of a decision. There's been a lot of change in the past couple of years, and we're happy to share that with the group and the community about what's new since this data that they collected has been presented.
So the short answer to your question is if you could submit that in the form of a question, that's an opportunity for city staff or the Met Council or the No Rush Lane Coalition group to sort of respond to and say, a question might be as simple as what types of buses are proposed on the line.
Right.
Then you can get an answer to that. So I think using the questions that you generate can actually help inform the community as well. And then we can share that information on the website. And so that's my last pitch to folks is maplewoodmn.gov. There's tons of information on there. This information is going to be on there. We'll find a way to get the slides and the overheads that were shown put onto the website for information sharing. And so if there's nothing else, we've exceeded our time by 6 minutes, but really thank you to letting me come here and do this work with the community, but also just thank you for good, robust engagement. I appreciate it. Thanks. Nice job.